All right, deep thinkers and audacious leaders, welcome to episode 1 of Nkoyo Unscripted, your weekly dose of unfiltered insights at the intersection of law, leadership, and learning. It's me, your host, Nkoyo, and together we're about to push some boundaries. You ready? Let's dive in. So today we are going to talk about the audacity of unscripting and why I have decided to launch this podcast and to have these unscripted conversations around topics. And so that's what we're going to get into today. And again, it's unscripted. So rock with me. We going to get somewhere real good, real fast. Again, if you are new here, as most of you are, I'm Nkoyo F. Young Lewis. I am a Jill of many trades. Was a former fourth grade teacher turned attorney, turned sometimes political candidate. I ran for office twice in the city of Atlanta, which was a pretty wild time. Wild times, super wild times. Lots of very interesting insights from that I hope to share with you all as we continue to grow in our connection with each other and our bold vision for what the future should look like. And so one thing that you should know about me off top is that I am not here for the status quo. I actually think that way too many of us are tinkering around the edges of important issues rather than being transformative in them because we're afraid of rocking the boat or rocking the boat too much. And I'll speak for myself too. Like, I totally understand, experience that fear of I'm standing out, I'm doing something very different. I have ideas and thoughts that maybe go against the grain or what people expect me to think and believe because of how I present or what party I stand for or what I do, etc. And so it's scary, I was talking with my husband just the other day, like we made a decision to not start my son in kindergarten right now with everyone. So he will not go to public school or any traditional sort of school for kindergarten, and how wild and nerve-wracking that decision was yesterday, which was the first day of school for kids in APS, and seeing everybody with their first day of school pictures and their kids, having this first to kindergarten, knowing, based on this decision, we're not going to have like a kindergarten graduation and a lot of these things that are like the traditional sort of route, and how it was hard to come to that decision for me as a former fourth grade teacher who taught in Atlanta, was someone who ran for school board, who really truly believes that we actually need to be investing wholeheartedly in our public education system because that's where the majority of children are, period. And that we should be able to do that across the city and that people shouldn't have to travel all over the place to try to find a great school for their kids. And so really believing in this and typically being a rule follower, not following the rule in this instant had me feeling real like you're making the right decision. Like, are you being wild? Like, Nkoyo, what are you doing? But there's things that I know that I know that I know that I want for my child that I don't want this replication of social class, which is what we often see in our public schools based on the way the classrooms are designed. They're preparing people for their role in society, their social and class role in society. And I want to fight against some of those things. Like, I actually don't believe we should be preparing our kids for a world that doesn't honor them, that doesn't value them, that instead we should be preparing the world for our children, which is a lot of why I get up every morning and do the wild things that I do and jump into hard races and impossible tasks. Because I absolutely believe that if we don't push and shift enough, and that if enough of us are not speaking out and getting loud and activating, that things stay the same. And I think, there's studies out there that says that people tend to become more conservative as they grow older. So all of us who are raging and wild in our 20s are probably a little more muted and conservative and thoughtful about things. And the problem with that is that the system is so enduring and it's held up by our complicity and our complacency sometimes that things don't move, or they don't move at the pace at which they do. And we are in such a transformative moment. This is an incredible time to be alive. This is an incredible time to be a leader. This is an incredible time for a lot of things because we're watching rapid shifts, right? So I was practicing at the time that the pandemic happened, and I was like, this is the moment, y'all. This is our moment to really push and reimagine what public education is, because things are so uncertain that we can't make a bad decision. We can't be like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be, because there's no model. And the problem is we tried some things and we quickly reverted back to a model that we know has been failing for decades, right? And to me, it's absolutely, utterly absurd. But I also know, as someone who put themselves out there, went in front of a whole bunch of people and asked folks to think differently, to move differently, to trust somebody else. From all this reading that I've been doing, great book, Creative Change, about how a lot of times we reject creativity because it doesn't follow the very structured, normal process. So we try to use a standard sort of status quo type process to assess creativity and whether something will work that's untested. And that most of us are a little adverse to that. And like, that is the reality. I saw it 2 times when I ran. I've definitely experienced it and felt it myself, even having to adjust to being creative or thinking differently. And so I really want this to be a place where we start to push, and we push our thinking, and we confront the discomfort that comes with the reality that things are really uncertain right now. And there's a huge opportunity with that. Like, as we watch globalization proliferate, like expand, blow up, like, we're not going to go back to a time where every single nation is of its own and doesn't interact with others. Like, that's not possible. I think McKinsey had a report like way back in like the early 2000s about how essentially we're basically not competing with each other based on, the folks that live in your state, right? That like these competitions, the way that the world is moving is actually becoming more regional. And I think now more global around how we're going to move forward, how we're going to interact. And it is the future skills to know how to engage with people who are different from ourselves. And so this whole idea that we'll just turn our back, America first, not embrace diversity, etc., is like such a debilitating idea, not just for people personally, but also like national security, international relations, so many things, because the doors are open, our countries are open. You can literally right now be in Thailand and do work in the US. You can be in New Zealand and do work in France. Like, technology has made all of that possible and accessible. Remote work has opened the door to us reimagining what work is. And I think our laws will have to figure out how they keep up with what some of these changes are, especially because, we agreed to this crazy thing called federalism, which means that certain laws are a matter of state and they can differ from state to state. So, for example, your education laws and what you're required and entitled to is a matter of state law. And so each state may have a different standard of what type of education you're afforded. They might have different laws about how classroom sizes and any number of things. There are often similarities, but like, they can make those differences. Criminal law, again, another area of law that is determined at the state level. So what might be a crime in Georgia might not be a crime in Colorado, and vice versa. And so you have to think about, like, what does that look like from one state to another? And then when we think about internationally, what does international law apply? Like, whose law? What country's law? So many things. Like, it's totally wild, but we have to grapple with these things because this is where we are. I think the other thing is, we're living in a time with generative AI, this artificial intelligence is skyrocketing. And I'm reading some really great books about the future of professions, the future of work, like what this world is going to look like from the lens of economists when we're thinking about what happens when AI and the robots can do some of the work that we have relied on people doing. And what does that mean for government? What does that mean our leaders need to be thinking about? Should there be a social security or social safety net for everyone? Because we may enter into a time where there's less work because we have chosen to automate certain things or allow the AI to do it. Or are we going to prevent AI in some instances because we believe that there's a social good to people being able to do the work? And like profound questions like, if work is not the central focus of all of our lives, which it often is, what does that mean for us? Not just from like a financial standpoint, but also from purpose. If a lot of people attach their purpose and their identity to work, what does that mean when we live in a society where people have less access to work or maybe don't even have to work, right? Like these are the bubbling questions that we have to get open and honest about, saying, hey, we don't know the freaking answer to these, but we need to grapple with them. And so that is why I've designed this space. This is why I'm excited to bring in incredible thought leaders who are thinking about these things, who are pushing in different areas, because right now is the time for us to disrupt and reimagine the status quo. We had a time during the pandemic, we tested it out, but we didn't really, hey, we were all waiting for things to go back to normal, even though they won't, they never will. The world has literally shifted and the rate of change is accelerating. So we all have to become more resilient. We all have to become more adaptable. We all need to be looking at what is the future skills, future economy, and thus what does that mean that learning needs to look like? What does the continuum of learning need to look like so that people have an opportunity to fully actualize and find themselves and be their full selves? And so that is a lot of some of the deep questions that we will grapple with here. And you're going to get unfiltered thoughts that you may or may not agree with. And it's okay. I just really want to name that. It's okay to disagree. We have become so safe that we don't disagree. And when there's disagreement, we're quick to cancel and cut off and shut down. And I'm never going to speak with you again. And like our conflict resolution skills as a society are poor, terrible, low. And so what I really want to do is also help create a space where we can have dialogue that's not an echo chamber, where it is literally like, girl, I don't agree with you at all on that. Or, I'm 10 toes down with you, and still be respectful, still be open to hearing and learning and adjusting and shaping our thinking, because we need lots of different thoughts to help us figure out what the best future is for all of us. And so if you're here for that, I cannot wait to get into these future episodes with you. I cannot wait for us to really pick apart how the law creates situations that may or may not be beneficial, how we can use the law as a tool to shape and reshape society in the way that we want to, and how, I'm going to be honest, which, was the devastating part about law school for me, is that the law isn't as neutral and arbitrary, like it's political. You'll hear me say this a lot. All this stuff is political, but there are a lot of decisions that get made. One of my favorite cases before I went to law school was Brown v. Board. Brown v. Board was a 5-4 decision, meaning that if one person had flipped, we wouldn't have had separate but equal is inherently unequal, right? But inside of Brown v. Board is a lot of really problematic ass stuff, including this doll study that they're like, oh gosh, guys, we need to get rid of this separate and equal because of how bad it is for Black children, like these poor Black children who are suffering from this belief, even though the study said that the poor white children were also equally harmed by racism, etc. But we didn't tell the whole story. We didn't write the whole story in that opinion. And the way that we have looked at Brown and have implemented it from that time on has come from a very deficit base around the impact to Black children, but not that the fact that this thing was bad for everyone. And so we're going to get into some of these things, some old cases, new cases. I'm going to talk to y'all. I'm going to get in with y'all about philanthropy and the laws and how political that whole thing is, because I also support a lot of social impact leaders, nonprofits, and I want to push y'all as leaders as well to be more aggressive, more assertive in chasing after the mission and the change that we need in society, and stop asking so much for permission to make the world a better place, because it will never be. One of the things that I've been rocking with right now and sitting with is Frederick Douglass's quote, the quote from Frederick Douglass that is like, power concedes nothing. And effectively that we have, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has, it never will. And unless we are willing to continuously demand that things change, they won't. Everybody loves to talk about the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I have been here, I'm about to hit the 4th level, so I ain't been here as long as some. But I don't know that it just arbitrarily bends on its own. A number of us got to jump on that arc and make sure that we break it in the direction of justice. Otherwise, we're going to be watching our children and our children's children and continuing to fight for the same very basic things that we have been fighting for. And it is my goal that we can end some things at this generation by being more audacious, by being more bold, more strategic, more thoughtful, more collaborative. And that is what we are hoping to create here. So thank you for joining us for episode 1. I cannot wait to rally with you on future episodes and with some of our really incredible speakers. But in the meantime, I want you to go out there and lead audaciously. Our future depends on it.